2023 Upside New York Sports Tech Summit. So my name is Julien Blin. I'm the CEO of Upside Global. I see a lot of familiar faces here, so it's great. We have a really packed agenda for you guys today with some great speakers, great teams, investors, and vendors. So just a few remarks before we begin. So you might have seen there's a brochure about the agenda. You can also see the floor plan with all the vendors. And you can also get all the information you need from one of our staff members. They're wearing some t-shirts with the Upside logo on it. It's a blue shirt. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to them. Now, those events are really meant for you guys to network, meet new customers, investors. And we plan to have those events twice a year, one in the US, one in Europe. I'll talk about the next one, which is at the PSG Stadium in Paris. So now, before we begin, I just want to give a big thank you to, of course, the New York Mets for hosting us today, as well as all the speakers and our 23 sponsors. So as you can see, right, so there's a couple of sponsors, right? So Teamworks, Orico, Thermo Human, UFIT, Kinvent, iEscape, Intech Health, Zone 7, Logic Inc., Super Sapiens, Prism Neuro, Box Altitude, Oxyware, 1080 Motion, DaVinci Wearables, Skill Count, Uplift Labs, Turkitics and Topspin Technologies, Pillsbury, Coolmit, and Exafly. So I also want to thank the partners, especially Courtside VC, Wise Ventures, the New York Textile Accelerators, the Wildcard Ventures, Acer Ventures, True Capital Management, and Causeway Media. So, and of course, I want to give a big thank you to the Upside teams, namely Jean, Eugene, Dominic, and the rest of our staff. Without your support or your hard work, this event would not be possible, so thank you. And if you want to connect to Wi-Fi, there's a public Wi-Fi, it's City Field Wi-Fi. So you can connect to the platform, to the Wi-Fi, there's no password. You can connect anytime. Also, all the sessions will be recorded. You'll be able to watch them on YouTube afterwards. We also have breakfast and also lunch at noon. So, and again, if you have any questions, you can reach out to our staff. They have a blue shirt, so they can answer any questions. Now, before I give the mic to Brad, I want to spend a few minutes to talk about Upside. Just so you guys know, some of you may not be aware of this, but we have a network of over 6,500 sports and tech executives. I started the business about 10 years ago. I didn't know anybody in sports, and I basically grew my network over time. But the newsletter actually gets sent to all the NBA, NFL, MLS, MLB, NCAA teams today, as well as some top teams in Europe and South America, and of course the VCs. Now, right now, we're working with about a third of all the NBA, MLB, and MLS teams. What we do is we essentially technology scouts. So we basically bring technologies to the teams, and we're also providing insights, market research, surveys. And so we also work with a large number of teams across the NFL, the NHL, the NCAA, Premier League, rugby. And our goal is really to work with about all the NFL, all the teams basically in the US by the end of next year. And we think it's achievable based on our network. Now, I want to spend a moment to talk about the platform. We launched this platform, the Upside Technology Scouting Platform, a few months ago. It's basically the world's first platform providing granular, anonymized team data on specific teams. We essentially gathered survey data from about 200 teams globally, across the NBA, the NFL, the Premier League, lots of different teams. And for each profile, as you can see here, you can get information about the annual performance budget, the types of vendors that they're using, the rating that they gave to those vendors, the price they pay, and we anonymize all the data because privacy is number one. And you will never see a logo of the 49ers or the Galaxy, but you only see the league logo, basically. We also profile about 200 vendors through the platform, so you can easily search across 25 categories, across AMS, GPS, hydration, AI tools, and we also include the survey data into some of those profiles. Now, the platform is being used and trusted by a large number of organizations today. You can see the logos here, and we're excited about what's coming next. I think we really exceeded our expectation in terms of the demand and the response. Now, because we're building an ecosystem and organizing events, what we've done is we introduced a combo which essentially provides a 30% discount on the membership as well as the tickets. So if you want to get both of them, instead of paying $5,000 for the membership of the platform, you just pay $3,500, and you'll get a discount on the tickets as well. Now, looking ahead, there's a couple of things we're working on. First, we'll introduce the Upside online community platform. So think about Facebook, where you'll be able to connect, find teams, investors, go into our next events. You'll be able to message them ahead of time. And then also, we're looking to introduce next month basically an e-commerce feature which will allow any vendors to sell their product through our platform directly. And some of them will provide discounts, so I think there's great benefits for the teams. And then looking at next year, we're also looking to have our next event in Paris at the PSG Stadium. That's September 5th. So we'll have more details on that. And then next year as well, we're looking to have our Miami Heat event. Well, so I should say Miami. It will be probably in December next year or January of 2025. So we'll go also provide some additional details. We'll be in Miami, hosted by a team. Now, if you have any questions about those events, you want to sponsor, you want to speak, you can reach out to me. And my email is julien@sportscounselsv.com. Now, this is just a quick preview of what this online community platform will look like. So basically, you'll be able to search across teams, vendors, investors, and then connect with them, message them ahead of time before the event. And this is just the event in Paris that will be on September 5th. That's going to be at the PSG Stadium. The website is already live, but we'll give you guys some more information in the coming weeks. And that's basically my information. If you have any questions about our events, you can also tweet or post pictures on social media. These are the LinkedIn names, and then Twitter as well. Okay, so with that, I'm going to introduce the next speaker, Tal Brown, who is the CEO of Zone 7.
Hello, everybody. It's very, very nice to meet everybody. Thank you, Julie, for this opportunity to be here. My name is Tal Brown. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a tech company that happens to operate in the sports market. We're a data science company, so we create data science solutions for our clients, specifically around load management, injury risk analysis, and we operate across NBA, NFL, Premier League, MLS, and some other sports. Fun fact, I'm not a sports guy, not an operator in the field. I'm not a trained sports scientist. I'm a data scientist. I spent a career building data platforms in other verticals, and started this journey 6 years ago when things were quite different in terms of the types of data that are available and how they're being analyzed. And things have changed dramatically in the industry. I'm from the Bay Area, but have been in the country for about 6 years. So I grew up in more of a soccer culture and have been kind of becoming more adapted to baseball and football over the years. So I'm going to talk today about this thing called load management and why it's important and what's happening with that along the last couple of years. But before we kind of dive into technical load management, I want to put this context in a wider perspective of what's happening in the sports economy. Right, and so if we kind of zoom out, look at the sports economy, we see that every couple of years, most of the leagues and governing bodies will kind of go through this process of trying to get, a new broadcasting contract. We talk about this magical X3 growth every couple of years. The last big one was NFL in 2021. Over the next couple of years, they're expected to generate $100 billion of revenue. The next big contract up for renewal is the NBA. Which is driving a lot of what's happening right now with load management. And if you think about it, trying to get an X3 growth in your revenue every few years, it's a pretty ambitious goal for any business. But over the last maybe 2 decades, we've seen that happen time and time again across almost all sports, not just North American sports, but also international. And we keep asking ourselves, what would it take for our sport, our league, to hit this metric in our next renewal contract? And that's what's driving a lot of the sports economy projects and momentum and capital spend. So before we move on, I want to put us all in this framework, in this mindset of, if we have to drive this for our next contract renewal, what would it take, right? What needs to happen? So if you look at the last decade, probably even 2 decades, we're seeing this growth across the entire sports economy, kind of like clockwork. Things have been growing. I don't want to say growing automatically with no effort from our side, from the operator side, but they've been happening quite consistently, right? And we're seeing this expansion. Partly it's about the digital economy and broadcasting things on the digital environment, social media, things that were not here two decades ago. But we are growing, and we have been growing dramatically for the last 2 decades. And I want to talk about 4 areas that this growth is kind of escalating and growing in. So number 1 is player valuations. I'm going to pick more of a soccer universe example as a first example. So in the soccer universe, there is this concept called a transfer fee, right? If a player gets transferred mid-contract, or if their contract includes a transfer fee, the team acquiring that player will pay the existing team a large fee. And this is a chart of the number of transfer fees over 70 million euros. So essentially, somebody is paying, beyond the salary, they're paying 70 million euros just to get that player on their squad. And that number is rising dramatically. You can see the post-COVID dip, but then we're kind of back on where we are. And what's interesting here is that this used to be dominated by the Premier League mostly, but now we're seeing new capital for new markets come in and compete. So we're seeing Middle Eastern teams spend a lot of money getting these really big superstars on their squad. That was not the case a couple of years ago, right? So the number of, the valuation of players in this soccer universe is growing. And I'm kind of picking on soccer specifically because in soccer, the player valuation isn't necessarily tied to a larger CBA. It's more of a, for better or worse, a freestyle kind of market. So the market is valuing players in a higher value. Another big element of what we do is the team valuations, right? So this chart shows us the average team valuation size per league in North America over the last 15 years. And you can kind of clearly see how teams are valued at more and more and more capital. So again, we live in an economy, capitalist economy. The market is determining the price of our clubs, and that value is increasing. And kind of we shared a couple of these examples on the right, just to bring in some soccer examples for you. So the Chelsea bid that Manchester United hasn't gone through, but those are all representing big growth. And interestingly, LAFC was valued at over $1 billion last year. 3 MLS clubs are now part of the list of top 20 soccer clubs, in pushing down some of their European counterparts. So that growth is very, very powerful and clear to us. Is this clicker's not working? Another area where we're seeing this is the broadcasting rights. So, on the right-hand side, the total number of billions of dollars spent in the U.S. on the right to broadcast sports events. Okay, that's by 2023, that's probably already double what it was in 2012. That's a pretty serious growth. And then on the left side, you can see a similar trend in the soccer leagues. So in global soccer, what's interesting in global soccer is they're starting to market themselves internationally. The Bundesliga, the Premier League, they're all trying to create new markets in Asia, Middle East, South America, etc. And they've done traditionally a very, very good job at globalizing the soccer economy. And then finally, what this means is that there is more and more demand for broadcasting sport. Okay, there's a demand to create the additional sporting moments, and that increase in demand, as we have in the economy, leads to increase in supply. Right, and this is the backdrop of what load management is about. There is a demand to broadcast more sporting moments, and that demand is a macroeconomic trend. It's not something that has to do with a singular team, player, or league. And we're seeing that across the board. What does that mean, increase in demand and increase in supply? It means that almost all sporting organizations are trying to create more of these moments. I'll go through a couple of examples. So, I just went yesterday through Grand Central Station. You couldn't avoid the NBA Cup advertisements, right? So there's new additional competition called the NBA Cup, creating more opportunities to play and broadcast. Let's kind of cross the ocean, rugby. So Rugby World Cup is expanding to 24 teams. Same thing with the Soccer World Cup. They're going up to 48 Soccer World Cup teams, which is, again, more sporting moments, more teams involved. NFL went through a phase of going from, I think it was 10 or 11 to 17 games over a season. And this is happening across the board. So there is a demand. People out there want to see more, and the leagues are mobilizing because there's a very, very strong economic incentive to do that. But there is a downside to that, or there's another side to that coin, which is more supply basically means more demand on our athletes, which also means that we are seeing these trends with our athletes that are creating the opposite pressure on the game. So what you're seeing here is a chart in the middle that basically counts the number of times an all-star or all-NBA player missed one game out of a back-to-back. Okay? So back-to-back games back in 2017-18, you had 47 times where a player was rested in a back-to-back, either the first or second game. That number pretty much doubled in 5 years. And that's just one key metric of multiple metrics that indicate there is a pressure from the other side to control some of the exposure of athletes to the demands of the game because of health reasons and sometimes other reasons. Another couple of anecdotal examples on the left side, Lionel Messi playing for Miami these last couple of months, road trip in Chicago, didn't play, and so the Chicago Fire kind of credited their fans on the ticket cost, or at least part of it, because so many fans were expecting to see him, prices went up naturally, and he didn't play. That's pretty unique. That hasn't happened almost ever. And then on the right side, of course, again, I think most folks here aren't from the soccer universe, but in a Premier League team, the Premier League team will compete in the Premier League, right, like their usual league. They'll have 2 domestic cups, okay, different rights holders, different schedule. They will compete in European competition, most of them, or some of them, so they'll be playing for Champions League or some equivalent. And multiple times a year, their players will hop on a plane, connect with their national team, whether it's Portugal or Egypt or England, and play for a FIFA-controlled tournament or a friendly or whatever. So overall, that pressure on players to play is just going, increasing. And each one of those rights holders, each one of those competitions are different. They have different rights holders, different schedules, and different monetization strategies. So that's creating a lot of unhappiness for coaches in these clubs and also for players who need to stand up and provide their bodies for these games. And so are we hurting the product itself? The product being the sporting moment broadcasted where our best players are giving their best efforts for the best fan experience out there. Now, what we think is happening is that this kind of pressure on players to look after their well-being as well as provide all these moments is creating a situation where this growth, this kind of auto growth we spoke about before, there's pressure on controlling that. There's pressure on perhaps are we pushing our players too much, and how do we manage that in a more holistic way? And so we're entering an era where if your best players aren't on the field, the economy. The sports economy growth is at risk, okay? And that's kind of a little bit what we're seeing right now with load management in the NBA context at least, where, resting players because they're hurt or recovering there's no question about that. But for other reasons, there needs to be, the league is instituting more processes around looking at that. And so from a wider economy perspective, the leagues kind of want and need their best players on the field playing as much as possible. And we're seeing this create a situation where load management, that used to be something that people in the performance department, medical department deal with, is now becoming something that executives are looking at, and owners are looking at, and boards of governors are looking at, and of course the league is looking at. And so the league is now incentivized to address this and to look at how much is this actually hurting our economy overall. If you look at a team perspective, I mean, it's kind of like, I'm not saying anything that you guys haven't heard many times before by saying that a team will perform better when their best players are on the field. But if you think about it, there certainly is, if we look at something like expected wins, that we kind of kick a season off with a certain model projecting what we can potentially do this season, that model is vulnerable to time loss of our best players. Okay? So hitting our expected wins or hitting our expected performance will be vulnerable to the volume of injuries and the volume of time loss, especially for some players at some moments. This is both supported by research and also supported by anecdotal stories, right? Like one of the most decorated and resilient athletes we've seen out there ever. Now, if you kind of zoom out for a sec, this is, the voice of the players in the industry is also rising, right? Player associations are pretty powerful organizations today. And the player economy or the player evaluation is also affected by their ability or inability to play at any given moment. Again, these are some anecdotal examples. The obvious one would be singular superstar in a team, is hurt, and that hurts the player and the team. But also, part of this international growth we spoke about before is also about key players that kind of like represent the ability to tap into a new market, right? South Korean players, Japanese players, Indian players. This is pretty unique, and so these players being affected by injuries and time loss also affects the team's commercial strategy for those specific markets. Okay, so this is basically saying load management is becoming a topic that covers a really wide area and it impacts a lot of stakeholders in the industry, not necessarily as it was traditionally folks in the sports science, strength and conditioning, medical departments. I grew up being a Spurs fan. Used to wake up like really late at night, watch the playoffs. So when Kawhi Leonard ended up in Clippers, I was so happy and excited to see what happens. And so like that was something I was personally very excited about. This is just my perspective as a fan out there. And this was a little bit demoralizing for me just as a fan to see so many times where their best players weren't playing. So purely from a fan perspective, we definitely want to see more cases where the best players are out there playing. And this is in any way not a comment on that organization. It's just my perspective as a fan. So I think we can now kind of transition to talk about load management and what it means. Before I kind of go through this, again, I'm not a sports scientist, I'm a data guy, so I look at things through the lens of a data guy. What does it mean to be able to understand risk at any given moment, right? Is that a consistent algorithm that we can calibrate? And so looking at this load management concept from that perspective, and having worked for 6 years across the NBA and NFL and soccer, the way we kind of like to define it in Zone 7 is it's a planned approach to control training stress, personal stress, recovery, performance, health routines to achieve better availability and performance. It basically means that we have a lot of variables we can control around what athletes do before and after a game. Partly it's about what happens on the court or the field, in the gym, outside the facility when they sleep and enjoy their lifestyle. They have their own genetics and they have their own history of injuries they're recovering from. They have a certain mileage. So some of these are controllable variables, some of them are not. But how do we craft a living and breathing routine to allow them to achieve what we all want, which is the best performance as frequently as possible on the field? And that's kind of how we look at the load management universe. Even though this term was coined a decade ago, in this scenario, I don't think that load management is about resting players. There's so many more controllable variables that we can influence. And so this is one outcome of a load management strategy, but it's not the only one. And there's so many other things that can be done and are being done today. And so like the media has turned load management into somewhat of a simplistic term, right? You arrest a player, that's it. But that's not actually the case. I also think that to avoid oversimplification, it's such an important and nuanced topic. Every organization and environment need to define what load management means for them, right? I mean, you can think about a way to look at, are we trying to overall increase availability for the entire roster? Or are there key players that we want to maximize and optimize for? Another thing to look at is moments, right? Clearly you want to have a deep playoff run, but are there specific games early on the season you want to optimize availability for? Which is quite a frequent thing where a team would receive the schedule and kind of highlight, okay, we need certain availability metrics here, here, and here, and sometimes we can deprioritize other moments. That's really, really important. Another one is, some positions might need to be performing in practice over others, right? Like we've seen this with some of our NFL clients where prescribing time off in a practice day for an NFL team is not going to work if it's the quarterback because we need him to run reps for the entire squad. Another one is often, not always thought through is where is this player in their journey, right? A last year of a contract has different load management implications for that player than it would be on other moments. Also, slightly later in their career, right? That last contract you might be competing with in your mid to late 30s, also different than what you would do in your 20s. And then finally, what we also really like to look at is major load management issues related to injuries when you're early in your career, late teens, can really hurt your long-term career development. Okay, so that creates a different type of mindset when looking at those players for those times. There is no one-size-fits-all. Okay, this is something that we've learned in the sports industry. We don't have a soccer algorithm or an NBA algorithm. We have an algorithm that's created per player, per environment, optimized for those specific needs. Okay, I think that, my perspective as an operator, as a data operator in this field is that, you can very broadly, again, slightly oversimplifying, you can very broadly categorize what teams are doing right now along two main categories. One is the more traditional, well-established, scientifically researched approach where, strength and conditioning protocols, athletic trainers, physiotherapists, there is a really good sense of what to measure, what kind of scans to do, right? What kind of force measurements to take. And then on the other side, what we're starting to see is there's this data science approach that's slowly creeping. It's creeping into a lot of different things we do in sports, right? A lot of teams will run a data science solution for scouting or for tactical analysis on how to defend or attack a specific set of players. But we're also seeing that slowly kind of trickle into the injuries, load management, strength and conditioning universe. And what does that mean? It kind of means that we have all this data coming in about what happens on the court, off the court, in the gym, sleep, recovery, stress, maybe biomarkers, maybe genetics. And we want to find ways to use that data to create meaning. For example, let's track things like acute and chronic load and see where we are, right? Can we create an algorithm or a flagging system to flag when we think, right? Like red flag means something with this player might require certain change. Maybe they're overloading, overexposed to a certain type of workload. Maybe they're underexposed, and we have to bring that up a little bit. So the data approach is starting to come into this space just like it has around scouting and almost any other department in sports. But it's hard to connect those together. When that works well, when you can create what we call kind of data-driven workflows into the sports, into the more traditional sense of load management, that's when we see success. I don't know how many folks are aware of the MDT. The MDT basically means the multidisciplinary team, right? It's usually a combination of performance specialists, data scientists, sports scientists, strength and conditioning, sometimes a tactical coach as well, because ultimately physical workload connects to what you do on the field. And in most organizations we work with, decisions around load management are made by a group that needs a sign-off maybe from some sort of a coach or GM, but that group, everybody gets to input their perspective. 10 minutes. And so that's what we've tried to create with Zone 7. It's how do we create data science components, solutions, workflows that help empower everybody to make decisions in a more transparent and robust way. By the way, what this is not, everything needs to live inside a data science circle. That's not what this is. Right? The people who staff these jobs are experts, and we just want to empower them to do the best job that they can, and by maybe finding ways to eliminate some blind spots in the data for them. So if we talk about Zone 7 for a moment, what we do is, well, let's start from the bottom up. And sorry for those visual glitches from going from Google to PowerPoint. The universe of collecting performance and wearable data is already there. It's great data, it's coming in high quality, connects on Catapult, StatSports, Hawkeye, Zebra, Second Spectrum, that's all there. It's coming into your organization, and typically it is copied into the organization into something in the lines of a database or an AMS. You copy it over and you manage the record there. We've added some logos here of companies that we've worked with in the past. However, the analysis of that data can either be done in a human way, right? Let's set up our dashboards, let's configure the thresholds, let's look at the flags, or we can use an algorithm to try and create some extra meaning from that data. And that's kind of what Zone 7 does. We don't make any of the data, we're not an AMS, but we create data science solutions that help understand the meaning of the data and contextualize it for you. What does that mean exactly? It means that we kind of suck in all the data, and then we create what we call a data lake. A data lake basically means, per sport, a collection of an anonymized copy of all the data we've ever analyzed in that sport. So let's take soccer as an example. We have a data lake that has data from hundreds of soccer teams. Nobody gets to see anybody's data, but our algorithms, what we call the deep learning component, can learn from and utilize the anonymous copies to become smarter. So the more seasons go by, the more data goes in, the smarter it becomes. And what does smarter mean? It means that we can flag injury risk based on a deep learning network rather than a set of heuristics based on acute chronic ratios or whatever. Kind of like a supercomputer trying to predict if a stock is going to crash by analyzing the history of all stock crashes ever. Okay, that's a metaphor. Don't take that literally from the meaning. Can we look at where you are in your microcycle? Okay, if you're a football team, you're going to play once a weekend. You're going to have a pretty steady cadence of rest, speed, strength, tactical, slight rest, and then another game, and repeat that. That's going to, of course, have variations between teams. Where are you on that cycle, and what do we do to optimize today for each athlete? And, of course, looking at longer periods of time. How do we plan for the next 5 games if we need a certain type of availability on game number 4, game number 5? I won't go through the entire demo, but this lives on an app, and it's also available for teams to consume via their own systems and databases and dashboards. To be able to do this well, though, you have to start with the foundational piece of understanding the breaking points or the limits of an individual athlete, which is a different way of saying forecasting risk. Now, nobody, I think, can predict the moment in time and the type of play on the court that will lead to a type of injury. It's not about a magical crystal ball that says 4 minutes into the fourth quarter, this will happen, this will break, this is going to be treatment. It's not that. But we can detect when a player is going up or down in the specific risk profiles. Are they at more risk right now than they typically are? And how does that risk compare over time? That is a robust risk score that you can kind of use repeatedly in your workflows. When you talk about results, there's 2 ways of looking at results. One way is to say, I'm going to analyze a lot of data historically and kind of calibrate the accuracy of what we do. Right? We have 70% success in flagging these types of injuries. Another way is to say, when deployed inside an organization and used, we are seeing these results pop up. So this is not me saying, if you deploy the software, you will win. And if you deploy the software, you will not get injured. This is not the case. But in some cases, when this gets incorporated into the ongoing process of evaluating risk and evaluating load management, we've seen some pretty powerful results show up. So I want to quickly go through a couple of them. These are all clients that have kind of signed up to be on the stage and speak about this. They've all spoken. Is that 5? Okay. We had a really successful project with Liverpool FC where they had a 33% increase in availability in the season where we went live. That basically translates to just more playing minutes for some of their key players. They won some trophies that year, but again, not taking credit for that. The recent Italian league champion, Napoli, the first year deploying this AI piece had a 59% increase in days available over the seasons before and after. And we also had a very successful campaign with LAFC where we saw a major increase in days available for them. Again, they happened to win the MLS Cup that year, but whatever happens on the field is not really something that we can influence. And so I think the key point for us is that investing in player health can be not just the right thing to do, but also can help drive sustainable growth for the entire sports economy. Right? It's no longer just something that you should look at from the medical department perspective. It's something that can actually be fundamental in how you drive and hit that X3 goal that we spoke about before, more across the entire sports economy. And if I had to kind of say the last comment, I would say, how can we deliver better player availability and smart load management? 3 things that have nothing to do with our product. Just thinking points for you guys to unpack later. So the first one is breaking down silos, supercharge your resources, and then define your AI playbook. So going through these one by one. Breaking down data silos basically means that there's a lot of data available out there that teams and leagues are collecting. Bringing them together, bringing those data elements together can be a real game changer. Traditionally, teams kind of very closely safeguard their data, players safeguard their data, and leagues safeguard their data. But there's a huge opportunity to create a unified source of data to help drive these things even further. What this kind of means is that the NFL, for example, Zebra or NGS is this huge, amazing collection of game data collected from every NFL game played. Right? That's a great step forward. Imagine that could be connected with medical records and with practice data and with gym data. That creates an asset that can benefit everybody. Right? The second thing is to supercharge your resources. Basically, what we're saying here is that the participation of multiple stakeholders within a team or a league in these processes is really, really important. Right? What we've seen is that organizations that find ways for coaches, medicals, strength and conditioning, and data to connect and work together collaboratively, that's where the change is most likely to happen. And finally, AI and data science, as we said before, is kind of like creeping into all elements of every sport organization, on the business side and on the operational side. And so, as leaders in the space, having a playbook, this is how we run an AI project, this is how we run a data project, that's really, really important. Maybe the last couple of years, running a data science project was kind of experimental. Let's kind of dip our toes, see what happens, can we do it, will it work or not? But this is now becoming a must-have piece for every organization to drive innovation and growth, is to have a mature playbook for that. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak today and wish you a pleasant day.